Okay, so now in your pen test, you've gotten a hold of a system. What do you do from there? Well, that's where sniffing the target comes into play. And I'm not necessarily sniffing an individual target. It's actually in reference here to the target of being the network or the company itself. Now, the purposes here of doing a sniff pen test is to, first of all, audit the traffic that's going across. So if we can see if anything's being exposed that shouldn't be exposed. We also will use it to identify possible rogue applications out there. Some of those applications could actually end up being a sniffing program itself. We also use this to find rogue DHCP servers as well as DNS servers that may be on the network, and to possibly find any unauthorized network devices that somebody may have placed on the network, because your users never do that, right? So the steps that we go through when pen testing and sniffing include going through the process of doing a MAC flood as well as a DHCP starvation. We'll also attempt to do a rogue server to see if I can trick people into using my machine instead of the company's systems. I'll also attempt to do an ARP poison as well as a MAC spoof, and then we'll check to see if the routers are sharing too much info by doing an IRDP spoofing attack. And then we also have the obvious a DNS spoof as well as cache poisoning. And to wrap it all up, one of the other tests that I'll do is a proxy server DNS poison. I know there seems to be a lot of spoofing and poisoning going on here. And so yes, you could say that the steps that we go through are extremely active on the network. And the reason why we want to make sure that we go through each of these steps is to make sure that we look at all possible ways that we can attempt to do a sniffing attack on the network so that we can help protect our company. So in this module, we went through and took a look at how we do pen testing as far as sniffing is concerned. We talked about the purpose. Again, the purpose is to audit traffic, to discover rogue applications, as well as rogue DHCP servers and rogue DNS servers. Again, while you're doing this process, if you find some of these devices out there, you need to make sure you take care of them right away. And then we also talked about that we use this type of pen test to discover unauthorized networking devices. Now, the steps that we went through, or the different attacks that we would do in our pen test, would include the MAC flood concept, overloading the switch so that we can turn it into a hub and therefore sniff across the switch. We also talked about DHCP starvation attacks, where we try to chew up all the IP addresses in the DHCP scope and then implementing our own rogue DHCP server, and actually at that point pwning the whole network. We also talked about trying to implement an ARP poison attack as well as a MAC spoofing attack. If I can poison everyone's ARP tables or change the MAC address of my system to make it look like it's legit, again, I can perform things like man-in-the-middle attacks. We also talked about trying to implement an IRDP spoofing attack. Again, this is where we use a protocol that's designed for listening, but because there is no authentication associated to it, it creates a vulnerability for us that we can actually change routing rules. And then, of course, we talked about DNS spoofing as well as the cache poisoning. Again, the differences here is being able to set up your own DNS server versus affecting the cache of a local machine. And then, of course, we also looked at proxy server DNS poisoning. So now that we've done this portion of the pen test, we'll then move on to looking at social engineering